1 missile, 1 ship, 11 dead. Here is what that engagement looked like, and what happened in the 33 minutes after. The USS Jason Dunham is named after a hero. Corporal Jason Dunham, United States Marine Corps, threw himself on a grenade in Iraq in 2004. He absorbed the blast. He saved 2 fellow Marines. He received the Medal of Honor posthumously. He was 22 years old. 2 decades later, the Arleigh Burke-class destroyer that carries his name would be asked to demonstrate the same calculus in the Persian Gulf. The math would be different. The principle would not. The Jason Dunham is a Flight IIA Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer, hull designation DDG-109, length 509 feet, displacement 9,300 tons full load. A crew of 281 officers and enlisted personnel. Her primary offensive armament consists of 96 Mark 41 vertical launch system cells, capable of firing a mix of SM-2 Block 3IB and SM-6 surface-to-air missiles, Tomahawk land attack cruise missiles, and ASROC anti-submarine rockets. Her close-in last-ditch defense is a single Merc 15 Phalanx Close-In Weapon System, a 20mm Gatling cannon capable of firing 4,500 rounds per minute. Her primary sensor suite is built around the ANSPY 1D phased array radar, a passive electronic scanning system that tracks over 100 simultaneous targets at ranges exceeding 200 miles. The ship cost approximately $1.8 billion to build. She represents 3 decades of evolutionary improvement in American destroyer design. She was not designed to stop what was coming. The Persian Gulf in the spring of 2026 had become the most dangerous body of water on Earth. American naval forces, operating under the authority of 5th Fleet Headquarters in Manama, Bahrain, had maintained continuous presence in the Gulf for decades. The strategic logic was unchanged from 1987. Freedom of navigation, protection of commercial shipping lanes, and the forward deterrence of Iranian military ambition. The Strait of Hormuz, 21 miles wide at its narrowest point, carries roughly 20% of global oil traffic through waters Iran considers its sphere of influence. American destroyers do not ask permission to transit it. They never have. What Iran had done in the months leading up to May 28 was not irrational. That is the first thing to understand. Iranian strategic planners had watched American naval presence in the Gulf and drawn a reasonable conclusion that the deterrent value of that presence depended entirely on the vulnerability of those ships. Sink one, damage one badly enough. Force an evacuation. Force a withdrawal. The entire architecture of American Gulf strategy collapses, not because of the ship lost, but because of the signal sent. It had worked for lesser powers in other theaters. Iranian military doctrine had studied those cases carefully. What those planners did not fully account for was the specific capability of the weapon they chose to fire and what using it would cost them. The Sajil-2 is Iran's most advanced operational ballistic missile, solid-fueled, 2-stage, with a published range of 2,000 kilometers and an estimated warhead capacity of 650 kilograms. Unlike Iran's older Shahab series, which derived from Soviet-era Scud technology, the Sajil-2 uses indigenous solid propellant motors that eliminate the hours-long fueling process required before launch. A Sajil-2 crew can move, set up, and fire in under 30 minutes. The missile climbs to an apogee exceeding 150 kilometers before descending on a quasi-ballistic trajectory at terminal velocities estimated between Mach 8 and Mach 11. What made this particular variant operationally significant was its maneuvering re-entry vehicle, a warhead casing equipped with aerodynamic control surfaces, capable of adjusting terminal trajectory by up to 40 kilometers from the predicted ballistic endpoint. Not enough to redirect the missile to a different target. Enough to defeat an intercept calculated against a predictable ballistic path. The Sajil-2 was designed to threaten Israel. It was designed to carry a nuclear warhead if Iran ever developed one. It was not designed to be used against a single surface combatant in the Persian Gulf. That decision, firing a strategic asset against a tactical target, reflected either desperation or a specific calculation about what message needed to be sent. It would turn out to be the most expensive miscalculation in the history of Iran's missile program. The launch occurred at 15 hours, 35 minutes and 47 seconds local time. The Sejil, 2 lifted from a mobile transporter erector launcher positioned 380 kilometers from the Gulf Coast, deep inside Iranian territory. At that range and trajectory, the missile would spend nearly 5 minutes in flight, reaching an altitude that took it temporarily above the bulk of Iran's own airspace. The ANSPY-1D radar aboard the Jason Dunham detected the launch at 15:36 and 12 seconds. The Aegis Combat System, the integrated weapons control architecture that ties together the ship's sensors, computers, and missiles, classified the contact as a theater ballistic missile within 4 seconds of first detection. It calculated the impact probability against the Jason Dunham at 92%. It calculated time to impact at approximately 340 seconds. 5 minutes and 40 seconds. Captain Jennifer Santos was the commanding officer of the Jason Dunham. She had commanded the ship for 11 months. She held a master's degree in applied physics from the Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey and had served 2 previous deployments in the 5th Fleet Area of Operations. When the Aegis system designated the incoming contact as a ballistic threat, she was in the Combat Information Center. Her order was immediate. 4 SM-6 missiles authorized for launch. Maximum engagement package against a single threat. What Captain Santos did not know, what no American commander in the Gulf had yet encountered in a live engagement, was the specific performance envelope of the maneuvering re-entry vehicle on this variant of the Sejil 2. The SM-6 Block IA is a capable missile. Its active seeker and data link guidance make it more flexible than its predecessors. Against a non-maneuvering ballistic re-entry vehicle, it achieves a probability of kill that United States Navy operational planning treats as reliable. Against a vehicle executing terminal course corrections at Mach 9, the intercept geometry changes in ways that stress the system's engagement algorithms. At 15:38 and 14 seconds, the first SM-6 reached its calculated intercept point. The Sejil 2 re-entry vehicle was not there. The maneuvering system had deflected its terminal path by an estimated 11 kilometers in the final 40 seconds of flight. The SM-6 detonated in proximity to a target that had moved. Fragmentation pattern intersected with empty sky. At 15:38 and 31 seconds, the second SM-6 engaged at a closer intercept range. The Aegis system had updated the tracking solution based on the observed maneuver. This time, the proximity fuse detonated within lethal fragmentation radius. The warhead casing of the Sejil 2 re-entry vehicle absorbed multiple fragment impacts. The outer ablative heat shield was breached. Internal guidance wiring sustained damage. The maneuvering system failed, but the warhead itself, 650 kilograms of high explosive inside a hardened steel casing, remained structurally intact, and it was still falling. At 15:38 and 47 seconds, the third SM-6 engaged. Proximity detonation. More fragmentation. The re-entry vehicle was now tumbling, its guidance fully disabled, its aerodynamic surfaces shredded. It had reverted to a pure ballistic trajectory. It was no longer maneuvering. It was also no longer presenting a stable, trackable cross-section. At 15:39 and 2 seconds, the fourth SM-6 engaged. The SM-6 seeker tracked the tumbling debris field. The fuse command threshold was not met. The missile passed within 80 meters of the target without detonation. It was a near miss in the technical sense. In the operational sense, it was a failure. The Phalanx Close-In Weapon System acquired the descending re-entry vehicle at 15:40 and 34 seconds, at a range of approximately 1,300 meters. Phalanx is the final layer. It is designed to engage subsonic anti-ship cruise missiles, not hardened ballistic warheads descending at Mach 6. The system engaged. 208 rounds expended in 1.9 seconds. Some rounds impacted the tumbling casing. The re-entry vehicle broke apart. But the warhead section, the hardened inner core, continued its descent, separated from the outer debris field, ballistic, unguided, and aimed well enough. At 15:41 and 7 seconds local time, the Sejil 2 warhead struck the forward superstructure of the USS Jason Dunham. The impact point was the forward deckhouse, the bridge, the Combat Information Center directly below it. The section of the ship containing the commanding officer, the officer of the deck, the helmsman, the tactical action officer, and the primary command and control infrastructure for the entire vessel. 650 kilograms of high explosive inside a case-hardened steel body, still carrying significant kinetic energy from its terminal descent, detonated inside the enclosed structure rather than on its surface. The difference is decisive. External detonation scatters blast energy outward. Internal detonation focuses it. The bridge was destroyed in the first second. Everyone inside died in the first second. The Combat Information Center, directly below and connected by a stairwell and multiple cable runs, absorbed the transmitted blast and structural collapse of the deck above it. Captain Santos was killed instantly. Lieutenant Commander David Wilson, the executive officer, who had been standing 7 feet from Captain Santos at the tactical display when the missile hit, was killed instantly. Lieutenant Sarah Chin, the tactical action officer, was killed instantly. Chief Petty Officer Michael Thompson and 7 additional sailors in the command spaces died in the first 4 seconds. 11 dead. 19 wounded, 9 of them critically. The Jason Dunham had lost her captain, her executive officer, her primary command center, and her bridge in under 30 seconds. What she had not lost was her hull integrity. Not yet. The Arleigh Burke-class was designed around a survivability philosophy that the Cold War taught American naval architects the hard way. A damaged ship that can still fight is worth more than a pristine ship that cannot. Compartmentalization divides the hull into hundreds of watertight sections. Damage control equipment and trained personnel are distributed throughout. Redundant systems mean that destroying the primary command center does not disable the propulsion plant, the weapons systems, or the backup communications suite. The Jason Dunham was on fire forward. She was taking water through structural breaches in the bow section. She was listing 3 degrees to port. She was not sinking. Lieutenant James Park was the senior surviving officer. He was 27 years old. He held the rank of lieutenant, junior grade, and had been commissioned 4 years earlier from the Naval Academy. He had served as the assistant damage control officer. When the missile struck, he was at the aft damage control station, the farthest point in the ship from the impact. He assumed command of the USS Jason Dunham, a 9,000-ton guided missile destroyer with 11 dead and 19 wounded and fires burning through her forward sections within 90 seconds of the detonation. Park's first actions were not command decisions. They were triage. He ordered damage control teams forward. He ordered the engineering officer to assess hull integrity and propulsion status. He ordered the communications team to establish contact with 5th Fleet on the backup satellite terminal. He did not yet know the full casualty count. He did not yet know whether the Iranians were preparing a follow-up strike. He knew the ship was damaged and that he was in command. He worked the problem he could work. The report Park transmitted to Vice Admiral Richardson at 5th Fleet was precise. The Jason Dunham had been struck by a ballistic missile. Captain Santos was killed. The executive officer was killed. The bridge and combat information center were destroyed. 11 sailors were confirmed dead. 19 were wounded. The ship was damaged, but maintaining position. He had assumed command and was awaiting instructions. Vice Admiral Richardson had been tracking the engagement in real time on the 5th Fleet Common Operating Picture. He had watched the SM-6 intercept attempts. He had seen the impact. He had begun the targeting process before Park's report arrived. The response that emerged from the emergency targeting conference between 5th Fleet and United States Central Command in the 45 minutes following the strike went beyond any previously authorized action against Iranian military targets. The Sejil 2 program was not merely the weapon that had struck the Jason Dunham. It was the program that threatened every American surface combatant in the Gulf, every carrier, every amphibious assault ship, every logistics vessel. Degrading the Jason Dunham was not the full scope of what the Iranians had intended. What Iran did not know was that firing the Sejil 2 had handed American planners the justification they had needed for years to do something the rules of engagement had previously prevented. The target set was comprehensive. The Sejil 2 production facility outside Tehran, the missile storage complex at Khorramabad, the Launch Authorization Command Center in western Iran that had ordered the attack, Iran's 3 remaining mobile Sejil 2 transporter erector launcher units, tracked continuously by National Reconnaissance Office satellites for 14 months. The ballistic missile test range at Semnan, where the maneuvering re-entry vehicle technology had been developed and refined. The guidance research facility whose engineers had solved the terminal maneuvering problem that had defeated 4 SM-6 intercepts. The assets assigned to execute that target list represented a cross-section of American power projection capability that had not been assembled in a single operational package since the opening of Operation Iraqi Freedom. 4B-2A Spirit stealth bombers diverted from a training deployment, each carrying a mixed load of GBU, 3-1 Joint Direct Attack munitions, and 2 GBU. 5-7A-B massive ordnance penetrators. The 30,000-pound bunker-busting weapons designed to reach hardened underground facilities 200 feet below the surface. 2B-52H Stratofortress bombers operating from Diego Garcia, each loaded with 48 AGM-158 Joint Air-to-Surface Standoff missiles, giving the aircraft the ability to strike from 370 kilometers outside Iranian air defense range. The nuclear-powered guided missile submarines USS Ohio and USS Georgia both converted Ohio-class boats carrying up to 154 Tomahawk land attack missiles apiece, launching 48 Tomahawks against the most time-sensitive targets. And the carrier air wing of the USS Gerald R. Ford, 44, F, A, 18E, F, Super Hornets, 5EA. 1-8G Growlers for electronic warfare and suppression of enemy air defenses, and 4E-2D Advanced Hawkeyes providing airborne early warning and battle management. The execution order for Operation Final Answer was transmitted at 16 hours and 8 minutes. 33 minutes after the Segil, 2 struck the Jason Dunham. The Tomahawks launched first. 48 missiles targeting the Mobile Transporter Erector launchers, whose positions had been updated by satellite pass 40 minutes earlier and were accurate to within 10 meters. The launchers had not moved. What Iran did not know was that American satellite coverage of those specific vehicles had been continuous and unbroken for over a year, and that the moment the Segil-2 launched, the positioning data for every remaining launcher in the Iranian inventory had been locked into targeting solutions that required only an execution order to transmit. At 16 hours and 42 minutes, the Tomahawks arrived simultaneously at 3 separate grid coordinates in western Iran. 3 Segil, 2 mobile launchers, their crews, and the missiles loaded on them ceased to exist within a 4-second window. The B-52S reached their launch points at 16:51 and fired 96 JASSM cruise missiles against the Karamabad storage complex from beyond Iranian radar coverage. The facility was hardened. Underground reinforced concrete bunkers designed to survive conventional air attack. The JASSM is not a bunker buster. What 96 precision impacts against a facility's above-ground infrastructure in a 90-second window accomplishes is the permanent inaccessibility of whatever is below it. Access tunnels collapsed, ventilation shafts destroyed, loading equipment eliminated. The bunkers were intact. Everything inside them would remain there indefinitely. At 17:04, the B-2S arrived over their targets. The Segil-2 production facility received 4 GBU, 5-7 massive ordnance penetrators. 2 bombs, each weighing 30,000 pounds, each designed to penetrate 200 feet of reinforced concrete before detonating. The production lines, the testing bays, the precision manufacturing equipment, the engineers who had spent a decade building Iran's most capable ballistic missile. The facility did not survive. The Guidance Research Facility at Semnan received 32 GBU, 3-1 Joint Direct Attack munitions. The scientists who had developed and refined the maneuvering re-entry vehicle technology, the specific innovation that had defeated the Jason Dunham's 4 SM-6 intercepts, died with their research. The carrier aircraft arrived at 17:18. The Super Hornets and Growlers struck the Launch Authorization Command Center outside Tehran in 3 successive waves. The Growlers led their ALQ-99 jamming pods, saturating Iranian air defense radar frequencies. HARM missiles, high-speed anti-radiation missiles, homed on any Iranian radar system that attempted to acquire the strike package. The first wave of Super Hornets cratered the surface structures. The second wave collapsed the above-ground complex. The third wave, carrying GBU, 31S with delayed fuses, penetrated the rubble into the underground command levels. The officers who had authorized the Sejil to launch against the Jason Dunham died in the facility that had issued that order. At 1731, the last American aircraft cleared Iranian airspace. The damage assessment took weeks to complete in full. The summary required fewer than 2 paragraphs. Iran's strategic ballistic missile program no longer existed as an operational capability. The production infrastructure that had taken 30 years and an estimated $4 billion to build was eliminated. The research capability that had made the Sejil too competitive with Israeli and American missile defense systems was eliminated. The command infrastructure that had directed the program and authorized its operational use was eliminated. The mobile launchers that had given the program its survivability against preemptive strike were destroyed. The storage complex that had held Iran's reserve missiles was sealed. Estimated personnel casualties across all targets ranged between 800 and 1,200, with a significant proportion of those being senior engineers, scientists, and military officers whose expertise represented decades of accumulated technical knowledge that could not be reconstituted quickly. The Jason Dunham was towed to Bahrain under escort from the USS Monterey and the USS Mitchell. Damage assessment confirmed that the ship was repairable. The forward superstructure required complete reconstruction. Hull breaches in 3 forward compartments required dry dock work. Estimated repair time was 14 months. She would return to service. Captain Jennifer Santos and 10 of her sailors were buried with full military honors. The Jason Dunham received the Presidential Unit Citation. Lieutenant James Park received the Navy Cross for his actions in the 47 minutes between the missile impact and the arrival of the Monterey's damage control teams. He would go on to command his own Arleigh Burke-class destroyer 4 years later. Iran did not respond with the military escalation its initial statements threatened. The mobilization of reserve forces along the Iraqi border lasted 72 hours before quietly reversing. The reason was not diplomatic pressure, though that came. The reason was arithmetic. Iran had fired its most capable strategic missile against 1 American ship. It had destroyed 1 forward superstructure. It had killed 11 sailors. In return, America had eliminated the entire program that had produced that missile, along with every remaining asset associated with it. The exchange ratio was not sustainable. Fighting a conventional war against the United States Navy without strategic missile deterrence, with only tactical anti-ship weapons, with no ability to threaten American carriers at range, was a different war than Iranian planners had prepared to fight. They chose to negotiate instead. The ceasefire that ended the Gulf confrontation 8 months later contained provisions that both sides characterized as balanced. The characterization did not survive contact with the underlying facts. Iran retained its territorial waters, it retained its navy, it retained its air force. What it no longer retained was any capability to threaten American surface combatants at ranges beyond the reach of subsonic anti-ship missiles. The strategic balance in the Gulf had been permanently altered, not by a sustained campaign, not by years of attrition, but by 33 minutes of targeting work and 1 hour and 17 minutes of strike execution. The USS Jason Dunham returned to 5th Fleet operations 14 months after the attack. She carries a new bridge, a new combat information center, a new crew, most of whom were not aboard when the Sejil 2 hit. She carries the name of a man who understood that the function of courage is not to eliminate the cost of a decision, but to make the decision anyway. Iran fired 1 missile. America erased the program that built it. That is not retaliation. That is a message about what the word deterrence means when the country sending it has